Hello and welcome to episode 244 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert as always, Damien Fay and me, Andy Leaks. Damien, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm very good. It's good to be back because we had a week where we missed a podcast, didn't we? We were like ships in the night.
Yeah.
And, well, we did actually realise we were going to not see each other that week. It was just pure coincidence.
We're just chatting in the office, weren't we? Saying, well, I'm not here Monday and I'm not here Wednesday, Thursday. Oh, we're not going to see each
Yeah.
other.
So, holiday calendars in the office. I mean, I don't tend to look at them. So we got that slightly mixed up. But it doesn't matter because we are back this week. So it's been a hectic week and we've got a lot to get through on the show. Before we start though, Andy, I want to mention the drinks with Pete Matthews. So there are many of you who listen to Pete Matthews' podcast as well, Meaningful Money, which is a fantastic podcast. Now, we're meeting up for a pint or two. I say pint or two, it's going to be clearly more than that if last year's podcast meetup is anything to go by. We're going to do a meetup on the 8th of November, so it's Friday. So if you're listening to the podcast as it's come out, that's this Friday coming. And we're going to the same pub we went to last year, which is the Cross Keys pub in Gracechurch Street in the City of London. So you can Google that. It's easy to find. We'll be there from 7 o'clock. Reality is we'll probably be there maybe slightly before, but we say from 7, and it's just completely informal. It's for anybody who wants to come along and meet us and just share a drink really and have a chat.
What I would say on that as well, it's a massive pub and you can never quite guarantee where you're going to be. It's a big, huge round thing and there's probably 200 or 300 people in there. So if you don't know Damien's face already, do your research. How you don't know what Damien looks like, I don't know. But do your research, go onto our website, see what he looks like, and you'll spot him in the pub a mile off. Yeah, he's the best looking chap in the pub.
That's so kind of you, Andy. But
not true.
No, and completely not true. But what we'll try and do is probably hang near the door like we did last year. So do come along. Make sure you look after your valuables in the pub because it's one of those pubs that
especially near the door.
Especially near the door. I'm only going to say that because it's a fine pub, but it is one where you're in the City of London. People had a few drinks, and unfortunately, one or two people last year brought some valuables that went missing. I'm only saying it not to put people off, but just to be mindful. If we stand there drinking all night, we all tend to forget where our possessions are. So do come along. Pete and I will love to see you. Andy will more than likely be there too. So will some of the other members of the Money to the Masses team. So that's next Friday, the Cross Keys pub in Gracechurch Street, which is just between Monument and Liverpool Street if you're going to walk it. So it's an easy pub to find. Keep an eye out for us and we'd love to see you.
Excellent stuff. So right, before we start, should we do some other admin? We said we'd mention the reviews on the podcast last week. We've had a couple in. Shall I go for it?
Crack on with it, Andy.
So we've got one from Phil. It says, great podcast. Damien and Andy really get into the detail of the subjects they discuss. The team obviously spend a lot of time researching. We do. Yeah.
We
Phil
do.
knows his stuff. For me, it's just the right amount of technical, but I would imagine some find it difficult to follow. That's fine. It's really good feedback. We don't mind that because, do let us know. You don't necessarily have to put it on the reviews. You can pop me an email.
Yeah, it's good to know what you love and what you might find tricky about what we do. So good review there from Phil.
And he finishes it off with a glowing review of Damien's midweek podcast. So if you don't already listen to that, make sure you do. We've got one from DJ Dom in the house. I've listened to this podcast for a long time and have greatly benefited from its advice, presented as though we're all friends and not financial idiots, which is refreshing. I've recommended to many friends and colleagues. Keep up the good work. So thank you, DJ Dom. And the last one we're going to read out this week is from Ian, who tells us he is a 55-year-old. Of all the podcasts I've tried, this has stood the test of time. I've been listening every week for around 18 months and love it. Damien and Andy have a great rapport and get the perfect balance of chat and money-related content. It has entertained and educated me at the same time. Keep it up, guys.
So thank you for sending in the reviews. Please do keep adding them on the on iTunes and anywhere else where you actually listen to the podcast because they are motivating. They help us get up the charts and everything like that. So please do it. I know it's all very easy for us to listen to things and just not add reviews, but please do it. It's so easy to do. In fact, I just mentioned to Andy, I was on there looking at the reviews that had come in so we could do it on the podcast. And I think I accidentally gave us a 1-star review because my finger went across as I was scrolling. So don't do that. Hit 5 stars because you can leave reviews reviews without actually writing a comment, but we love the comments. The last bit of admin before we start, Facebook group is growing. I think there's somewhere over 700 members. I would love to get that to 1,000 in the next couple of weeks. We should be able to do that relatively easily. Do join the group. If you go onto Facebook groups and search for Money to the Masses, or go to facebook.com/groups/money to the masses. And just to give you a taster, this week in the group we had discussions on tax on side hustles, offset mortgages, which was a very interesting topic. What to do if you're starting out as a young person who's got a job and debt, what you should be doing financial planning wise, savings accounts, changing investment platforms, and timing in terms of investment. Is now a good time to invest? And on that, if you've been listening to midweek markets, you'll know that we've hit all-time highs in the S&P 500 in America. So markets are buoyant again, and I've just written a piece for MoneyWise, actually. So that's one of the personal finance stroke investment magazines, publications out there. And I've done a guest article in there, which was published this week, on how to deploy cash in a market like this. Is it best to invest via a lump sum up front or to drip in? And there's some numbers and diagrams, everything in the article. So do go and have a look at that. If you Google it, you will find it, MoneyWise online. Now, Andy, on with the show.
Yeah, so what are we going to cover? We normally do 3 topics a week. What have we got?
Right, we're doing investment to start with, winter portfolios. So there's an anomaly that is similar to the sell in May, go away. Basically, it's almost as a result of that adage that we've done in the past, we've covered, that states that the winter months are the best months for investing in the stock market. It's disproportionate the returns you get during that period to the rest of the year, and you can take advantage of this particular anomaly. We're going to be covering that and looking at funds. We're going to be doing junior ISAs because junior ISAs turned 8 this week, so that's quite a good excuse to have a quick run through on some of the best ones out there. And finally, we want to talk about mental health, and it's very topical. It's something we do all need to talk about a bit more, and in particular in relation to insurance. So we're talking about life insurance and health insurance, and Andy's going to do that piece for us.
Great. So we're going to start with the winter piece, talking about investing at this time of year.
So as I stated, there's an anomaly that comes off the back of the sell in May adage that you have. So the sell in May, go away, don't come back till St. Ledger's Day, which is an adage that if you sell out of the market at the beginning of May and you don't buy back in again until the September time when the St. Ledger's horse race is, it's a different day every year, which isn't helpful. But the idea is that the market is weak during those summer months. Now, the exact reasons why that might be the case, you can find lots of different answers, but one line of thought is that the traders in the city would go off to their polo matches, their holidays during the summer, down tools, trading levels were thin on the ground, and so it meant that there was more volatility, and basically people weren't trading. So when they came back, they had sold out their portfolios when they were going on holiday, and therefore it made the market dip, and then they'd buy back in aggressively when they came back in the autumn, and it would push the market up. So we've covered that in the past, and we've looked at whether that is actually true or not, and it does seem to be an element of truth in that old adage. Now, from that, there's a similar adage, which is the winter portfolios. So almost leading off of that, there's this concept or idea that the winter months are disproportionately better for investors. So between the 1st of November and the 30th of April the following year, that 6-month period is the sweet spot for investing. Now, the UK Stock Almanac, which is a website, and if anybody knows what an almanac is, it's basically...
I only know from Back to the Future.
where there's basically an analysis, almost a book that analyses trends. So in Back to the Future, he finds the
Sports Almanac.
Yeah, and it's basically all the results from the races, doesn't he? And then he goes into the future. And
football games, like it's all of the sports, and so he knows all the results.
Yeah, and so he becomes a millionaire, or the bad guy. I can't remember his name anyway.
I'm sure it's Biff.
It probably is a Biff. And now, in a similar fashion, what they do with stocks is they just look at these trends, and they look at how the market might perform in November or April, or how the FTSE performs versus the US stock market. But they also identify some of these trends, and there is a trend that they identified of the winter portfolio, almost this winter period. Now, if you'd invested £100 in 1994, and so you'd left the money invested over 25 years, it would be worth now £257. That's without dividends included, so that's sort of extra rolling up. Now, if instead of doing that, being invested for the entire period, you had simply invested in the market, and I'm talking about the FTSE 350 here, so that's the combination of the FTSE 100 and the FTSE 250, which is therefore very liquid part of the market. If you'd invested just over the winter period in that particular part of the market, so by that I mean between May and November you're in cash, and then each November you buy into the FTSE 350 and then you sell out again in the following May, and you keep repeating that. If you'd done that, then you would actually have £341. So you can see there's a huge outperformance, yet you're only in the market half of the time. Conversely, if you'd only invested during the summer months, so you'd therefore held cash during the winter months, so you've done basically the opposite, you'd end up with £69. So you can see...
Blimey, that is...
It's an amazing
unbelievable.
Yeah, so there is this underperformance that seems to occur. Now, Interactive Investor, which is one of the platforms out there, is actually the second biggest platform in the UK, behind Hargreaves Lansdown. Now, they have taken this concept and for the last, I think, 4 or 5 years, have been launching winter portfolios. And what they do is they go and look at the FTSE 350 and they, in particular, create a conservative portfolio. And they look at all the stocks in there because the trend is more pronounced in some stocks than others. And so they screen all the stocks out there in the FTSE 350. They look at the stocks that have actually made the positive return for every winter period in the last 10 years. And then they pick the best 5 stocks. And that makes out the winter portfolio, and they change it every year. They update it. And by doing that, their portfolio, if you back tested it over 10 years, would create an annualized return of 17.8%. And that's without dividends included. So the FTSE 350 over that period would have done an annualised rate of return of 5%. So it's a massive difference. Now, they also did a slightly more aggressive version of this portfolio, where they looked at stocks that for 90% of the time, so 9 times out of the last 10 years, had produced a positive return in the winter period, but they also picked the ones that had the highest average return in each of those periods. So they sort of went a little bit more aggressive, and the annualised return for that portfolio has been 27.1% excluding dividends, which is an incredible number, but you have to realise that they're taking a lot of risk in doing this.
Yeah, I suppose because they're really limiting the number of stocks there, aren't they?
Yeah, so it's like we always talk about diversifying and not putting all your eggs in one basket. They are literally putting all their eggs in 5 baskets, but the volatility of those portfolios is incredibly high. So it's a high risk strategy. So what I did is I thought, as I do these sometimes sitting at my desk, for 80/20 investor members, could this be applied using funds rather than shares? Because as you know, a fund will hold something like 50 to 100 different stocks. There's a huge diversification of like stock specific risk. There's mitigation of that. So there's a less stock specific risk because they hold lots of stocks. So I was thinking about, could you use this, and does it work on funds, or does that dilute it down so much that you actually don't get any benefit in doing so? So the full research piece, I spent a long time doing this for 80/20 investor members, which is just about to come out actually as I'm recording this podcast. So if you want to read it, you can get a free trial. As ever, go to moneytothemasses.com and you will be able to find a link through to 80/20 investor, and you can have a 1 month free trial if you wish. Now, what I did is I looked at it for funds, and yes, it does work because it's more diversified. Yes, you get lower returns than you do on the Interactive Investor stock portfolios, but there is lower risk, and the numbers are quite stark in terms of the lower level of volatility. And I won't go into details on that on here because it would just confuse things if I'm just quoting too many numbers. But to give you an example, over the last 10 years, the FTSE 350 was up 119%. So it's a big number. If you do a winter portfolio, where what I did is I looked for funds, this was a conservative version of the portfolio, looked at funds that had made positive returns in those winter periods, November to the end of April, every year of the last 10 years, and picked those with the highest rank. So what I did is each year I ranked where they were in the big table of funds. And that included UK all companies and UK smaller companies. So it's kind of the similar thing. I went across the full sort of FTSE 350 universe, the funds that invest in those kind of stocks. What happened is that I built a portfolio of 5 funds just to mimic what the Interactive Investor portfolio did. And what you found, it was pretty much split between UK all companies funds and UK smaller companies, because there has been a bias in the last decade to UK smaller companies outperforming. And what we found is that the winter portfolio that I made using a similar methodology that I've just described returned 201% over that 10 years. Don't forget that for half of that time it's been in cash. So the portfolio goes cash in the summer, into those 5 funds in the winter, and I just repeated it for those 5 funds the whole time. So the portfolio was based upon funds that had been consistent over that period. In each winter period, the 5 funds weren't necessarily the best performing funds within their respective sectors at all, but they were just consistent. Their average place was, over those 10 years, fairly consistent. So that return was quite incredible when you compare it. I decided to look at what would have happened if we just invested in those funds in the summer months and not the winter. So the opposite again. So summer in those 5 funds, winter in cash. And the return of the portfolio was 39.86%. Wow. So you can see the stark difference that mirrors a lot of what Interactive Investor found. So the annualized return for that portfolio, the conservative portfolio that I built, was around 12% a year. So it's lower than the 17% that the Interactive Investor had with their 5 stocks.
But you're diversifying massively, aren't you?
But you're diversifying. Now, I'm not saying that people go out there and they do this. I'm just pointing out the numbers. If you go back and look and just pick 5 funds over the period of time that's shown consistency, what did they do? This is the numbers. So there's a slight bit of backward looking, and you're looking at numbers. It's not data mining, but it's just looking objectively at the numbers and what would have happened. So using that, I then picked a portfolio for this year, which we're going to see with 80/20. Just put it out there, come back at the end of April and see what happens, just as an experiment. Interestingly, I did do a portfolio that was more aggressive to kind of try and replicate what Interactive Investor did with theirs. So the funds were consistently in the top of each of the last 10 years, and for 9 out of the last 10 years at least, they had made positive returns in those winter periods, November to the end of April. And you can look at what the result of that was. But what I've generally found as a rule of thumb is that there were quite a lot of funds from this universe. There was about a third of all the funds that I looked at that had positive returns during the winter periods. So I'm talking about 80 odd funds. So it's almost, I'm not saying you could pick anything, but it's definitely a pattern that seemed to be reflected quite widely. I'm not going to recommend an individual fund, but I will just point out that there was one fund in particular, Fidelity UK Smaller Companies, that happened to appear in both the portfolios I created. Now, that's not a recommendation. Don't take that as financial advice. I'm just highlighting it, just telling you a fact that it appeared. So there you go, Andy. Winter portfolios is an interesting phenomenon. There seems to be something that actually backs it up when you analyse the data. We've built 2 portfolios. We're going to see what they do. They could crash and burn. They could produce a positive return. We'll just have to see. Don't forget that we've got Brexit coming, and that plays havoc with UK smaller companies. So anything like a recession, if we get one, will play havoc. So it'll be interesting to see. But as a piece, it just wanted to point out to people there is definitely some kind of bias that happens. There is a positive 6 months that if you Google it, it has been talked about in other markets like America as well, that this phenomenon exists. At the start of 2019, we launched Damien's Money MOT, which is the culmination of about 10 years worth of work on money to the masses. It's a tool that will give people an assessment of where they are with their finances in just 2 minutes without any registration or paperwork required. My Money MOT will tell you how you measure up against thousands of other people who have already taken the MOT themselves. By answering just a few simple questions, you receive a grade from A to E, and it doesn't matter whether you're a student or a multi-millionaire, the grade is relevant to you as a person and your stage in life. Crucially, you can sign up to receive your own free action plan that's personalised to you and delivered via email. The Money MOT covers everything from wills to cash to bills, all the way through to retirement planning. Within the first 5 months after launch, more than 10,000 people have done Damien's Money MOT for free. And after 10 years of work, I have to say it's something I'm extremely proud of.
Okay, so we're moving on to junior ISAs, and well, happy 8th birthday. You should play some music, I don't know. Congratulations, junior ISAs, you made it to the ripe old age of 8.
8, yeah.
What have we got?
So junior ISAs 8 this week, and it's just a good time to remind people of the positives of them, and just to highlight some of the junior ISAs that are out there, because I think some people have put off the idea that they have to choose the underlying investments themselves. A lot of the robo-advice companies now are doing junior ISAs as well. So it's almost you buy it off the shelf. So they have portfolios. You just basically pick which one you want, what risk level. And I'm not saying do this again, but people tend to pick higher risk portfolios for junior ISAs because the investment time frame is normally up to 18 years of age. So obviously before junior ISAs were child trust funds, and if you still got one of those, then you can move them across into junior ISAs because generally junior ISAs provide better cash interest rates and they have far wider choice in terms of funds. The platforms all allow you to open junior ISAs. So
I'm actually in the process of moving my child trust fund over to a junior ISA as we speak.
Do you know what, Andy? I will need to high five you because it's been on my to-do list for about 5 years to do the same thing because you can exactly the reasons why you're doing it, no doubt. So I want to do that, and I want to be able to build some kind of decent portfolio that I can take some risk with. Where it is at the moment, it's very limited.
Do you know what it's done for me as well? It's reminded me that it's there because I kind of forgot about the child trust fund. I hadn't been putting money into it, and now I'm going to move it over and actively put whatever I can afford, a few pounds in, but at least it's something, whereas before it was really doing nothing.
Yeah, and exactly, just a few pounds makes all the difference. Now, the numbers are quite interesting. If you've done the full ISA allowance, the full junior ISA allowance, it's different to your stocks and shares ISA allowance, it's a different thing altogether. If you'd invested the full amount each year, there would be £31,552 worth of contributions that had been paid into your junior ISA if you've done that. So that doesn't, I'm not talking about growth here. I mean, there's some numbers I've seen out there to suggest that some people who've been really going for it on their junior ISAs and taking plenty of risk have got about 80 odd grand in there, which is quite impressive. Bear in mind that your darling child will own it from the age of 18. So as I often point out, they if they turn out to be the child from hell, you can't stop them getting their hands on it. It's not your money once you put it in there. The positive features of junior ISAs, at the moment you can put £4,368 in it a year. That goes up generally every year, and you can't carry forward any unused allowances. Now, parents or legal guardians can open junior ISAs, but anyone can pay into it. So that's a thing to bear in mind. You get cash versions of junior ISAs, you get stocks and shares versions of junior ISAs, but as I say, once they turn 18, once the child's 18, they get hold of the money. Now, I just want to quickly run through some of the rates that are out there just to spark people's interest, and maybe some of the other stocks and shares junior ISAs, because there'll be people out there thinking, do you know what, I should do this for my child, even if it's only £10 a month or something like that. Now, in terms of cash junior ISAs, you can get some pretty good rates out there. Coventry Building Society have 3.6%. Santander 3.25, TSB 3.25. In fact, there's about, as I'm looking at a list here, there's about 15 providers that offer above 2.25% on a junior ISA. So go and have a look at those. In terms of the stocks and shares junior ISAs, now all the platforms will tend to offer them. So that's Hargreaves Lansdown, Interactive Investor. So you need to look at the individual charges. What you want is something that's obviously very low charge, because you're going to be investing for the long term, and charges do obviously start to eat away at returns. Vanguard, they're one of the cheapest ways to invest. So you could use a Vanguard Investor is their platform. You could use that platform and invest incredibly cheaply. Vanguard has just cut the charges on a number of their tracker funds. I mean, you can get tracker funds from almost like 0.1% from Vanguard, so it's an incredibly cheap way to invest. So do look at that. We've done a whole review on Vanguard Investor if you're interested. Other ones to look at are Wealthsimple. Now, Wealthsimple is a robo-advisor, so you can just pick a portfolio of varying risk levels, and they also manage the first 10 grand free. I mean, if you go and read our review, you'll find a link through to an offer where they do manage the first 10 grand free for a year. So there are a range of stocks and shares junior ISAs out there. Some of them have minimums of £50 a month. So Charles Stanley have £50 a month. AJ Bell is £25 a month minimum. Hargreaves is £25 a month minimum. So is Interactive Investor. But someone like Wealthsimple, they don't have such minimums. So do go and have a look around. If you want more information, I'm not going to go through all on the podcast. I just wanted to spark people's interest. Like Andy said, a reminder that these things exist and they're very tax efficient ways to save for your children's future. Then do go and look at our website and Best Junior Stocks and Shares ISA article.
And if you're a member of our group, you'll see it being posted in the group after the podcast goes out on Sunday. We'll pop it in the group so people can get access to it and discuss.
And of course, the other thing is you don't have to invest via stocks and shares ISAs. I do always mention that you could use your own ISA allowance to invest in, with the idea of earmarking it for your children. But of course, that is your ISA allowance you're using. The benefit is your child doesn't get it at the age of 18, but at the same time, it is still your asset, so it will still fall under your estate, etc. So something to bear in mind as well.
Okay, so to finish off the podcast, I'm going to take the lead on this one, and we're going to be talking about depression and mental illness and how that might impact health insurance and life insurance. But it's not a piece, it's not all doom and gloom, it's actually a positive piece, isn't it?
Yeah, because what's happened is we were talking about this in the office, and in the past, when Andy and I first knew each other, which was a long time ago, and we were working in the insurance industry at that point, and the way insurers used to treat people who had depression or anxiety or anything like that, a mental health issue, they would be almost scared of them when it came to insuring them. And we were discussing the whole idea about it and how things should change. And actually, Andy's done some whole load of research on this. And the positive news is insurers treat people with mental health issues far better now than they used to. So what used to happen is it'd be a bit more like if you were wanting life insurance or maybe health insurance, but particularly life insurance, as soon as you disclosed that you had some mental health illness, then the insurer would almost run a mile, because it was the idea that you might end up killing yourself, or there might be other issues that come from the fact you've got stress or anything like that. And so that was something that is very negative, and I think it led people to almost not wanting to disclose it to their doctors, because even if you didn't admit it on your form, which is a bad idea if you're applying for life insurance because you wouldn't get paid out under non-disclosure rules, but if they wrote to your doctor and then found out you'd been speaking to your doctor about mental health issues and you'd had medication, then it would come back and you'd have issues trying to get life insurance. But what Andy's going to go through on this section, that things have changed a lot, and it's much more positive now that you can get life insurance. And also, the reason we mention it, because I don't like the idea that there are people out there who might not want to talk to their doctor about it because they're worried about when they want to go and get life insurance or health insurance and things like that, that it's there on their record. It's almost they've been tarred, and that shouldn't be the way it is. Because we were talking about it in the office, and I remember from years ago when me and Andy were discussing, it seemed to be one of those things that you'd almost think, well, if I had a mental health issue, God, the last thing I'd do is tell my doctor, because then the insurers would never touch me with a barge pole, and that's now changed, thankfully.
Yeah, and that's terrible, really. Especially we're talking about mental health awareness a lot now, and it's been really positive. It's been in the news. It is a condition. It is an illness. It needs to be understood better. There's still lots of work to be done, but the good thing is the insurers are now starting to get on board with it, speak to the relevant professionals, and understand that condition, and that it can be managed, and that you can have insurance alongside having certain conditions and illnesses.
Yeah, so Andy's going to run through what would likely happen if you applied for life or health insurance if you've got depression or anxiety.
Okay, so let's start with health insurance. And the first thing to mention with depression, mental illness, it doesn't affect the cost that you pay for health insurance. So it won't have any impact on how you apply for the cover or how much you pay for the cover. The crucial thing with health insurance is whether you can make a claim for anything arising from depression, anxiety or mental illness. So to understand that fully, you kind of need to understand how health insurance is underwritten. The insurance companies have two ways of assessing you. They will assess you based on a moratorium basis, or they will fully medically assess you or fully medically underwrite. They call it FMU. So you have the choice of which route you want to go through. Most people choose the moratorium route because it's easier. Essentially, what moratorium means is you fill in a very simple application form, normally 4 or 5 questions, yes or no answers, and then you're covered. And then in the future, if you come to claim, the insurance company will look at that claim and likely ask to see a report from your doctor, see what's on the records, and if you've suffered from any conditions in the last 5 years, they would normally exclude any claims arising from those, and that's how it works. Once you take out a moratorium policy, and this is crucial, the insurance company will actually allow you to claim for anything where you've not suffered any symptoms, any conditions, you've taken any medication or sought any advice from a medical profession. They will cover you for that so long as you've gone a 2-year period. So let's say, for example, there's something in your medical records a few years ago and you were taking some medication. Once you've taken a policy out on a moratorium basis, if you were to go 2 years completely symptom free, you haven't taken any medication or had any advice, then you're fully covered. Now that's crucial when it comes to health insurance and depression and anxiety and mental illness, because you may have suffered from something in the past and it may well be on your medical records. But on a moratorium basis, if you've got better and you haven't sought any treatment or had any issues, then if you had a recurrence of a mental episode, if you needed psychiatric treatment, but you'd gone a period of 2 years with that insurance policy, they'd actually pay out. They would cover you for it. Now, interestingly, on health insurance, there are insurance companies out there that offer additional policies on top of the normal health insurance policies. They call it like a bolt-on. You can apply for those and have, for an extra few pence a month, you can have extra cover and you can get extra tests, extra assessments, that kind of thing. And that would normally cost a little bit more, but you get additional cover in the area of expertise where you need it. Now, unfortunately, if you have suffered from mental illness in the past, you're unlikely to get accepted for that cover. Let's move on to life insurance now. That's health insurance. There's an article on our website. I'm going to post it in the group next week, and you'll be able to have a look through that and see what you think. Moving on to life insurance then, slightly different. Now, with life insurance, there isn't two different ways of underwriting a policy. There's one way, and that's the insurance company are going to ask you a whole heap of questions on the application form. And if you alert them to anything they want to find out more about, they will either ask you more questions or they'll want to probably write to your GP. Now, with depression and anxiety, as I said earlier with Damien, the insurers are getting better. They understand it more. They'll ask more probing questions. They understand the medications. They understand the treatment. And so it's very likely, if you know the treatment you've had, you know the medication you've been on, you know the time periods when you suffered, you know the trigger points, there's every chance that an insurance company is going to look at that information and assess you based on what you've given them. No need to write to the doctors, so long as you can give them accurate dates, accurate medication, reasons for why it happened, then you're all good. As we said earlier, insurance companies are getting better. There's every chance you'll be accepted, but not only that, you could well be accepted what they call standard rates, so they wouldn't increase your premiums. An example of that, which I've done in the article, is, let's say, for example, you're a 35-year-old going for life cover and you have indicated on the form that you've had an episode of mental illness in the past. They would ask you further questions. Likely they would ask you, when was the most recent episode? Were there any trigger points? Have you had any medication? Unfortunately, they do then go on to ask about suicidal thoughts. Have you had any time off of work? And then from that, they'll make a decision. So if you're a 35-year-old going for life insurance and let's say your most recent episode was 5 years ago, the trigger was work stress, you didn't take any medication, you didn't take any time off of work, the likelihood is they'll accept you from that application. No more questions asked. To give you an example of where an insurance company might ask extra questions and you'd have to pay a bit more on your premium, what's called a loading. Let's say, for example, you're that same 35-year-old, you had issues within the last 2 or 3 years. It was maybe due to a relationship breakdown or just general anxiety. You have had medication, but it was well controlled and you've had minimal time off work and you were on medication and now you're fully recovered. The likelihood is in that situation, even if say you've had 4, 8, 12 weeks off work, they'll still accept you from the application form, but they may apply a 25 to 50% loading on top of your premium. Now, a 35-year-old going for £200,000 for the life cover, the premiums are around about £10 or £12 a month. So you'll be looking to pay maybe £15 or £16 and you'll be fully covered. Life insurance doesn't have exclusions, so you're fully covered for the condition that you've had. So it's no longer this thing where you can't get cover anymore. You can get the cover and the insurance company will likely be able to accept you from the application form. There are times when they either won't be able to cover you or may want to postpone the application, and that's generally if you've suffered more recently or if you're unsure of the reasons for the mental illness. Insurance companies really like to know the trigger points and understand why the condition is there. If you can explain that, if there are reasons for that and you can support that with evidence, then there's every chance they'll accept you. Very rare these days that an insurance company will decline your application, and generally you'll find that they'll only decline your application if you're on multiple types of medication, you've had multiple episodes, different trigger points, and perhaps if you've suffered suicidal thoughts or suicidal attempts in the past, then unfortunately it's unlikely you'll be covered. In that situation, you're probably better off looking at something like, if you are over 50, go for over 50s life insurance cover. You can get covered straight from the application, no questions asked. Or you may want to, rather than putting your money into insurance, why not put it into a savings account and let that build up and let that be your family's sort of nest egg, if you like, to look after you once you've passed away. So that's kind of, I was going to say whistle-stop tour, but we went into a bit of detail there. But I think it's relevant and necessary to go into detail because things are changing. It is more positive now. So if you have suffered from any mental illness, depression, anxiety, work stress, whatever it is, one, make sure you always mention it on the application forms. There's nothing to be gained from hiding that from the insurance companies because, unfortunately, the likelihood is they will find out and then it will be non-disclosure and it won't pay out. So make sure you mention it. But similarly, don't hold back from speaking to your doctor, speaking to your friends, speaking to professionals that can actually, counsellors that can help you. Speak out. The likelihood is it won't affect your insurances and you will feel much, much better because you'll be able to get the treatment that you need. Right, so that is it. Damien.
So that's it then. We're finished, aren't we, Andy, for this week? Slightly longer than usual, but I had a lot to get in.
Yeah, and we've missed a week, so we kind of feel like we're catching up.
We're getting a bit overexcited, so there's more for you. Don't forget to come to the pub to meet Pete and the rest of us, the team at Money to the Masses. More details will be on our social media channels. You can contact us the usual ways: email, Twitter, Facebook. Join the Facebook group, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, and please do leave us a review.
Oh, last thing, we've got a YouTube channel. It's growing day by day. Do make sure you go onto YouTube, search for Money to the Masses, click subscribe because it really helps us share the message, and we're doing more and more videos, and you can see Damien delivering his Midweek Markets podcast. Right, until next time.
Until next time.